Okay, so now we're going to briefly talk about heterocyclic amines. And what the heck does that mean? Okay, so a heterocyclic amine is when we have a cyclic organic compound with the nitrogen as a part of that ring, right? So because nitrogen can form more than one bond, it can form two or three bonds with carbon, we can put it in the middle of a ring. So for example, in this case, we see that this nitrogen is bound to two other carbons, so it's a secondary amine. But more importantly, that those carbons are connected, so it's part of a ring. So this would be considered a heterocyclic amine. And our real goal is just to be able to spot heterocyclic amines. That's all we're going to really talk. I mean, there's some interesting factoids that we'll learn, but the main skill that I want you guys to have is to be able to distinguish what's a heterocyclic amine and what isn't. And importantly, that nitrogen has to be a part of that ring. Right, so just some other examples as well. They can be 5 or 6-membered rings. They can also be even, we'll see an example where they're even bigger. But yes, importantly, they are part of the ring. So the simplest one would be this 5-membered ring. And again, the nitrogen is that 5th member, right? So 4 carbons and a nitrogen making a 5-membered ring. Simplest because they're all single bonds. If we have, for example, pyrrole, where now they have 2 of those carbons are double bonded together, actually, I guess two pairs of carbons are double bonded together, that would also be considered a heterocyclic amine. This one's actually aromatic, but that goes a little bit beyond this course. And then you can have multiple nitrogens in that ring, right? So this is an example. Imidazole, it has 2 nitrogens in that ring, okay? And these are all 5-membered. You can have 6-membered rings. So again, we sort of saw the piperidine, which is kind of one of the active ingredients in black pepper. There are other ones. This one, actually, pyridine is a really famous weak base that's used in organic chemistry because it's nonpolar. It can dissolve in nonpolar solvents, but it still plays the role of a base, accepting a proton. And then we can go all the way to purine. This is actually a key component of both your DNA and your RNA, is a purine ring that you see here. And so this is a heterocyclic ring that now has 4 nitrogens. One of them is a part of like this 6-membered ring here, and then that's connected to another 5-membered ring. So you can see that they get to be pretty crazy. But importantly, the nitrogen is involved in the ring. It's not sort of just sticking off, right? So an example of something that would not be a heterocyclic would be if I had this pentane ring and then over here was the amine group. No, the nitrogen has to be a member of the ring. Okay. Heterocyclic compounds, heterocyclic amines are kind of everywhere. So ranging from compounds that are alkaloids. So this is one of the designations of a heterocyclic compound that we want. There is this classification in alkaloid, and these are, alkaloid, and these are compounds that are produced by plants that have found to have been in some way, shape, or form stimulating to human beings as well. So we're going to see some examples of these, okay? Nicotine is one of them. Nicotine is, of course, a compound that's naturally produced by a tobacco plant and is a stimulant in human beings if we ingest it, right? It's highly addictive. I'm sure we all know that. It also has other sort of like effects on us as a stimulant. So it increases levels of adrenaline, your heart rate, your blood pressure, all that sort of stuff. And notice that nicotine is a heterocyclic compound, actually combination of 2. We have a nitrogen in this, kind of like, it's almost like a benzene ring, but not quite. And as well as a nitrogen in this 5-membered ring. And those connected, that's a nicotine compound. Another alkaloid, which would be caffeine. Okay, so another famous one, right? So we know that these are naturally produced by the coca plant, as well as coffee plants and tea plants. And you can see that caffeine is a heterocyclic amine. It's got a bunch of nitrogens in that compound that are all members of the ring. And of course, this affects our body as a stimulant, can cause alertness, but also sort of the negative effects of a stimulant, so the dry mouth, insomnia, etc. Right? But so caffeine is another alkaloid. Another two kind of big examples are morphine and codeine, right? So morphine, codeine, and then we can actually even go to heroin and OxyContin. These all kind of fall into the same category of being now depressants, but they're naturally occurring. Actually, I don't think oxycodone is naturally occurring, but it is very, very similar to heroin, which is naturally occurring. But heroin, of course, comes from poppy plants, right? So this is, again, just a naturally occurring compound that has this heterocyclic amine. I know it looks really weird in this compound here because it's part of one of those branched where you have a ring on top of a ring kind of a deal. But indeed, this nitrogen is a member of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 membered ring. And yeah, that's the structure of heroin. So these are all alkaloids. These other two that I glossed over would be morphine and codeine. They're similar kind of depressants. They are used as painkillers. And yeah, those are naturally occurring in the poppy plant as well. Okay, so some tidbits about these alkaloids. You should know the big ones that we covered, right? So caffeine, nicotine, morphine, heroin, and then be able to spot the heterocyclic compounds. That's going to be really important. So which one of these would you classify as a heterocyclic compound, and which ones would you say are not heterocyclic amines? So this is the only one that is not a heterocyclic amine, because although it's an amine, that nitrogen is not a member of that ring, right? It would have to be like up here or something to be considered a heterocyclic amine.